I'm going to take my second cardboard circle, 2 is always handy, and I'm going to go directly underneath that top cake, and I'm going to move that to the side. I'm going to clean off the crumbs with a damp cloth that I have on my board. The fewer crumbs I have while I'm working, the better chance I have to not make a crumb cake, which some of us specialize in, but this time I'm not trying to make a crumb cake. So now what I have are 2 layers, and this time I actually want to add a delicious filling to it. So you can make your own filling from scratch. You can add fresh fruit, you can whip cream. I happen to like to use ready-to-go pastry fillings, the same kind that they would use in a professional bake shop. When I'm using the fruit fillings, I tend to pair them with actual fresh fruit. So no matter what the season, if it's summertime and I'm getting beautiful farm fresh strawberries, then it's a nice compliment to have the sweet, I call it strawberry goo inside. But in the wintertime, if I still want strawberries and they're not very tasty and not very sweet, my strawberry goo comes in handy. And there are a variety of flavors that you can choose from: Bavarian, chocolate, pineapple, guava. It just kind of depends on what you like, but you can also make those flavors yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a pastry bag that I had prepared earlier, and it has a coupler on it. And I'll talk a little bit more about a coupler later, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my turntable and the coupler to prepare this cake for an actual filling. So the dam of icing that I'm going to put here, I'm going to start just a little bit from the edge of my cake, and I'm going to squeeze firmly until the icing comes out using my turntable. Now, this tip coupler did not have a tip on it. It only has just the coupler itself. And this is pretty much the only time I use just the coupler. But the reason I did that is because now it allows me to take my delicious filling and put it right inside. And you never want your filling to be higher than the base that you've created, or you're going to have a mess. And I like to use this tapered spatula. It has a slight pointy edge to help me spread that filling all around. So right now, if I did have some beautiful fresh strawberries, I would just slice them and layer them right on the top. And now I can take my top cake and gently add it to. So the other thing I'm going to do is to take this dam of icing that I have, and remember that little chunk that I have missing from the cake, or this section here where it doesn't meet the board completely. I'm going to use this to fill it in. I've only met a handful of people who absolutely don't like icing. So typically, if you have to fortify your cake with a little more icing, it's going to be okay. I'm one of those people who doesn't care for icing as much. So I've got my dam of icing, I filled my cake. So now I'm going to take my icing this one happens to be a purchased icing, but even if I made it, the process would be the same. Now, you might notice that the icing is very airy and doesn't look very smooth. You always need to stir your icing if it was sitting. You need to stir it to make it nice and creamy. If you do not stir it, the icing that you put on top of the cake is going to look exactly like it did when it was in your bowl. So I'm going to take some icing and I'm going to dump it on my cake. You are not putting butter on toast where you're just putting a tiny bit. You actually are going to be adding a lot of icing, because the secret to icing a cake is to take away the icing. So I'm going to take my spatula, I'm going to press down firmly, and I'm going to move the icing edge to edge. I don't want this icing to fall off of the cake. I just want it to get to the edges for me. Now, I'm going to take some additional icing. I'm actually checking for crumbs. I don't want crumbs in my actual big batch of icing, so I'm going to take a little bit more icing at the bottom of my spatula. I'm going to find the spot where there's some icing hanging out. I'm going to marry the two. I'm going to press in firmly and move that icing around. So I've got icing all around the cake. Now what I want to do is I want to take my bench scraper. My bench scraper is typically used for making breads and things like that, but it's a beautiful tool. It's got a perfectly straight edge that I can get a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to place this right on the edge of the cake using my turntable. The turntable is your friend. And get that nice and square. Now, if I miss a spot, I can add additional icing and then do it all again. If you want to crumb coat this, once you get a light coating of icing, all you need to do is to pop your cake into the refrigerator for just a few moments to let the base coat of icing set up, and then come back and add a second coat of icing. Now I'm actually going to take my smaller spatula and I'm going to address the top. So I've got a lot of icing here. I'm going to leave it flat. I'm going to take it from the outer edge toward the center, removing additional icing. So now I'm going to go back to my larger spatula, make sure that it's nice and clean, and hopefully make just a few more passes to square this cake off. You can also do that with your bench scraper. I don't usually worry as much about getting it perfectly smooth if I know I'm going to decorate it. But quite honestly, there's something nice about a rustic looking cake that's not perfect. And so then I just want to take my damp cloth and I want to clean my circle. And then this cake is ready for its final embellishments.